Okay, well, we'll call the meeting to order.
Kurt Arma,
I am here.
Dave Buster,
Here from Bluffton, Indiana.
Gilbert Culver,
Here.
Greg Hamley, Nikki Miller,
Here.
Phil Lutz,
Here.
Eric Lincoln,
Here, Chicago here.
Mark White,
Here, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Dave Woodruff.
Here. Okay, we have a forum from Bluffton, Indiana.
Yes.
And with that, approval of the board minutes from May 13th meeting, which were distributed to everyone. Anyone have any additions, corrections? As a motion by the support. Support. As a motion and support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, the same? Minutes are approved. At this point, a member of the public can address the board on a non-agenda item. Anyone wishing to address the board on a non-agenda item, come to the podium, give their name and address. Please limit your remarks to 4 minutes. Anyone would like to speak about an item that is on the consent agenda, we could ask that it be removed. Do we have any public comment? Right, there being none. Move on to the finance.
Good morning, everybody. Today I have two financial reports for you. I'm going to start with the monthly report, and then in your packet was also the 2020 year-end financial report. April and May are included in your packet. May marks 41.67% of the way through the year. Year-to-date operating revenues are at 40% of the budget. Still no concerns here. This is the area of the budget that's most affected by the decrease in employments. Airfield revenues are a little high. We received an annual payment that came in higher than budgeted. And we're really hopeful that traffic continues on the trajectory that it is. We'll end the year pretty well with operating revenues, if that is the case. Operating expenses are at 38.4% of the approved budget before depreciation. No areas of concern here. Everything looks as expected. Parking expenses look a little low compared to the budget. We had budgeted for full staffing, not really knowing what this year would look like, but we're still not carrying the second parking attendant on our busier days. PFC revenues came in at just over 38% of collections, or 38% of budget with collections through April, which is a little bit ahead of expectations for that point of the year. Any questions about the monthly report?
One question. How are the CARES funds and other COVID-related incomes accounted for? I don't really know whether it's grants that you don't report, they take the money or how does it happen?
Right, that's a really good question. So grants are non-operating revenue, so you won't see those in the top portion of the report. It's down in the bottom. Is non-operating, and revenues are recorded when they're received. We receive them after we spend them and request reimbursement.
So the
Yeah,
CARES funds really are just a promise of funds that you can.
yeah.
go after as you ever qualify.
Yeah, as we have expenses, if we want to be reimbursed for those expenses, we have to send the documentation through, and then they'll reimburse us. And you'll see in the 2020 report, I did two, about $1 to $1.5 million requests for 2020, and I'll show that in the report how that looks. It'd be a little better illustration than the monthly.
Today, then
assess what it is you are submitting and then have they tried anything at this point?
No, no. So our requests go through the state and then to the FAA. And other than, hey, could you add one more little justification for your bond payment reimbursement? They've been really great to work with on the CARES program.
Amanda, when I'm reading this, it's the 2018 actual on this column.
Okay, there's a typo at the top then.
I
It
wanted
is,
to make sure
it-
we weren't comparing something to 2018.
no, that would have been, that's a typo.
Got it, okay, yeah, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Right. So in your packets was also the 2020 annual financial report. I put some paper copies on the table for you if you want to follow along. This report I bring to you every year. It's based on the audited financial statements of the county, which is a giant document. So I pull out the airport section and put it into a little nice report for you. 2020, you'll see a lot of references in this report to COVID just because of the financial impacts that we had here. And it's starting on the first page here. I'll give you a brief overview of what the document says without hopefully reading anything to you. Net position is a really useful indicator of financial strength of an organization. So we always start off with that. Net position decreased by just over $1 million in 2020. This is mainly due to the fact that our net investment in capital assets decreased. So at the end of the year, a depreciation entry is booked showing, the portion of the assets that we used during the year, but we did not complete and book any large capital projects at the end of the year. So with that depreciation entry, bringing capital assets down and not completing any capital projects last year financially, it brought our net position down a little bit. Current assets, which is your cash, your accounts receivable, inventory, things like that, increased during the year. And liabilities decreased during the year. Our liabilities mainly decreased because we pay on our debt every year. We pay on the bond. That decreases the liability that's out there. That's the biggest reason for that. The largest portion of our net position, which is almost 88% in 2020, represents our capital assets. That's land, buildings, machinery, things like that. Our restricted net position, whose use is determined by outside entities, that's our passenger facility charges and our pension assets. And you'll see that in the restricted row at the bottom. And then unrestricted net position, that's what's available for us to use at any time. That actually increased by almost 500,000 in 2020, about 8%. Based on the size and the nature of the airport operations, we should have about 3 to 6 months of operating expenses in unrestricted net position. At year-end 2020, our unrestricted net position was over 11 months of operating expenses. I think that's really great that we finished 2020 with that. I was personally, concerned about how the pandemic would affect us, and we stayed pretty strong throughout the year.
That 495, that wasn't in part of CARES, that was actual net non-spent funds.
It's everything going into the pot and then taking out everything that's restricted or capital assets. So unrestricted net positions is what's left over at the end. So there's a lot of moving parts. So as we go through the report, we'll talk a little bit about cash, a little bit about income and expense, and then how CARES fits into that.
But it is fair to say that number would have flipped without the CARES money.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, without CARES, that number would have looked.
All right, I guess that's okay.
Yeah. On the next page, talks about cash and investments. In early 2020, in February of 2020, the county treasurer pulled the airport's funds out of the investment vehicle that we were in. We had been in a money market. I talked to the current county treasurer, who was not the person in the office at that time. So they're not really sure if this was COVID related or really good timing. Either way, I think it was an all right move. So we ended the year not in any investments, and probably won't invest in anything at the treasurer's office for a little while longer. Like I said, there's a new treasurer this year, and they're looking at the overall financial health of the county. So we started the year with over $4.9 million. At the end of the year, the combined balance was just over $5 million. I think this was pretty remarkable considering everything that happened last year. And at the end of the year, as the books were closing, I did submit a CARES reimbursement for $1.3 million. That was funds that we could request out of the CARES grant, but not cash in our account yet. We were waiting for that cash to come in. So that's not in this $5 million here.
So, Amanda, they put nothing, the county's put none of our money into any investments.
Mhm.
So it's just sitting in a cash account.
Yep,
Checking account.
it's sitting in the county's general bank account, yes. Our portion. They use one account for everything.
Have they done that with all of their funds?
I'm not certain what the treasurer does with the other funds. That did not come up in our conversation the other day.
That would be interesting to know, because it's nice to have a return, but there's not much return that comes from it, just sitting in cash.
Right.
And it just doesn't seem right that we should be sitting around with the cash flows $2 million.
I'll share with you before they pulled it out, we weren't earning a whole lot either.
I'm sure we're in the money market.
We were in a money market,
We're getting a half a percent.
likely.
I guess I think it should be invested in something. Sooner than later.
I'll have another conversation with the treasurer.
And it would be really interesting to know what other sections of the county, what they did with those other groups, however the groups out. And I don't know what airport and the other categories of the county are, but whatever they put the rest of the county in education.
If they put it in.
If they put it in, yeah.
Okay.
And if they didn't, can we?
The county treasurer has the legal authority to manage the cash and investments for the county.
We wouldn't include this month, these months.
Correct. But I'll have another conversation with them and share the feedback.
We're not missing a lot of interest income here based on what was in anyway.
Right.
So the half percent of that.
That's true, but there's an opportunity out there in other areas that are safe. You know, the market is for years. We didn't participate.
Okay, I'll move on to operating revenues. Operating revenues are those that are activity based. So the decrease in traffic last year had its biggest effect here. Last year we had almost 55,000 enplanements, so people getting on the airplane, which is a significant decrease from the 156,000 that we had in 2018. 2019. As well as our 3-year average. So operating revenues did go down quite a bit last year. And then I'll illustrate in a couple pages here how the CARES revenue helped with that. Operating expenses in 2020 were just slightly under what they were in 2019. The pandemic had a really minimal impact on our expenses because our facilities need to be maintained regardless of the amount of air traffic that's coming through here. So we didn't have a lot of opportunities to decrease expenses. Where we did take advantage of that, like in the parking lot with the decreased staffing, with some of the terminal utilities. The escalator was off for a little while when we weren't really needing it a whole lot. So we did do those types of things, but the pandemic impact here was pretty minimal.
And it's clear, so the airport was open and operating the entire stretch, right, all through
That is correct.
last year.
Yes. Sure. And then on page 5, we take a look at non-operating revenues and capital contributions. So the CARES funds that we used to support our operations last year was just over $3 million. And this is, you'll see that on this page. In the grants and donations part of the pie chart. Also included in there is the LEO reimbursement that we get to support the security operations at the airport, which is pretty small. Also in here is the PFC revenue. We collected $234,500 last year in PFC revenue, compared to over $615,000 in 2018, which is the last year, full year of PFC revenue collection. So an impact there, but CARES really helped us with operating revenues versus the operating expenses that we had last year. Page 6 talks about, looking forward. We are, as staff, working on the 2022 budget recommendation that will come to you next month. We actually have a finance committee meeting after this meeting today to discuss it. Still an ongoing analysis of our traffic and how it affects the financials and how everything will look for next year. We should have an interesting discussion at our finance committee meeting here in a little bit. The rest of the report is the audited financials in the typical format that you see them in. I won't spend a ton of time going through those, but those are in there if you have any questions about them or like a little explanation of how some of the stuff is on here. Feel free to reach out to me. Sometimes being government, we title things a little bit differently than you would see in a private business. Any questions? All right. Thank you.
Now we move on to considerations and first being agenda items. Prior to the meeting. So does any board member have any item on the consent agenda that they would like to remove? There being none, I would entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion.
Motion, have a support. All in favor, say aye, and I think we better do roll call vote. People on.
Kurt Argyle,
Yes.
Dave Buster,
Yes.
Gilbert Halbert,
Yeah.
Nikki Miller,
Yes.
Cecile March,
Yes.
Eric Rankin,
Yes.
Mark Weiss,
Yes.
James Woodward.
Motion carried. To non-consent agenda items, the first one.
Good morning, everyone.
Good to see you all in person again. It's been a while. I have a request to approve and authorize an agreement with our selection for consultant services to provide the planning, design, and engineering services for our CARES program development projects. Just in review, those projects do include a reconstruction of our front entrance driveway, the modernization and improvements of the ARF building and the snow removal equipment building, as well as a development of an apron, aircraft apron to the south of our property line. We did receive 3 proposals to review. The internal selection committee met and had really good discussions about them, and we recommend that the board approve the agreement with RSNH. Let's see, it was, again, that all the proposals were really well constructed and thought out, but we were just impressed with RSNH's approach for how we'd like to handle the services and the program, CARES program. So I'll entertain any questions or.
Quick question. How are we paying or funding RS&H? Is there a flat fee? Is it a percentage? Is it a case-by-case consulting payment to them? How does that work?
Yeah. So.
It's no different than any other project that we're doing here. They'll put together a proposal for basically engineering services or architectural services, depending on what the project is.
Right.
And then we will review, and then the board will approve each one of those
Contracts.
Contracts.
So this is about the master agreement.
Is there,
Yeah, except for to those 4 projects.
Right.
Yeah.
do they have a customary rate that they charge, or how would get a sense of the cost of this? It would be on a case-by-case basis, one then, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, to
Right.
put together a proposal based on the project, how many hours and all that, and they have an hourly rate, and I'll call it that we'll have the opportunity to review. It's no different than the process that we use for meet and hunt for our general consultancy, as well as Tower Pinkster for our architectural one. They'll turn those rates in, and then we will evaluate those.
So in their RFP, did they submit any sort of ballpark to know how they benchmark against the other 2 competitors?
We're, by federal requirement, we're not allowed to ask for any fees or anything. These are requests for qualification.
Okay.
So we have to make a determination which consultant will be the best for that absence of any fee. We will negotiate with them as part of the contract fees. If we don't feel that that's right, then we can throw it away and then go back to our second.
I think it brings the question, what about meet and hunt? Why weren't they just by default, the people we use for the
Yeah.
programs and or if they submit a
Sure. Yeah. So it goes back to our one of the original discussions we had with the FAA regarding the program, the development program itself, and how best to approach the spending of these funds. And so it was their perspective and direction guidance that they gave us that these projects fall outside of the general consultant scope of services that Meet and Hunt are currently providing. So they recommended that we put it out for an RFQ to select a specific consultant. Meet and Hunt was eligible for sure to submit proposals and eligible to be selected. But again, we just based on the proposals that were submitted, we liked RSNH and just their approach, I think, aligned best with what we had in mind for the projects.
Eric, can you give me a little bit more information on RS and H? Where are they out of? How long have they been in business? What size of an operation are they? How big is their staff? That sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I believe they're based out of the Detroit area. They have offices in Lansing, and they do, they're very familiar. They're well-known in the aviation community. It's awkward, Mark. I don't know where to look on my screen. Or, you know, around.
Have they been around 20 years, or are they kind of a newer operation?
Yeah, they actually were the selected consultant to perform the engineering and construction services for the terminal building, the new terminal. So they're familiar with the airport, Kalamazoo area, and definitely been around the industry for a really long time.
Certainly not a fly-by-night operation.
No, definitely not.
Mark, this is Dave.
Yeah.
They go back a lot farther than that. They go back to some of our master plan studies back in the 90s. So they've been around a long, long time.
Are they as old as you, Dave?
No,
Okay.
I'm going the other way now. So
Oh, are you? That's all I had, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I think we already have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. Do we have any further discussion? Call for the roll call vote.
Kurt Ardema,
Yes.
Dave Buster,
yes,
Gilbert Melver,
Yeah.
Nikki Miller,
Yes.
Cecile Munt,
Yes.
Eric Rankin,
Yes.
Mark Weiss,
Yes.
James Woodruff.
Yes.
Thank you.
And,
All right, this request is for approval of a concessions plan, and oh, here it is. With the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act. In airport lingo, we call that CARES 2. This is the second round of funding that came out of the federal government. A small slice of the funding that we received is to help our concessionaires. Airports around the country received this, and the FAA has given guidance to us on how they would like us to distribute these funds to our concessionaires. They provided this handy dandy little spreadsheet and a webinar and exactly what to put in what box, which is great for me. So this request is to approve that plan so we can enter into contract amendments with our concessionaires to provide this funding to them. And there's a little summary on your board brief. Concessions funding amounts to just over $32,000. And the plan allocates this out to rental car companies and other concessionaires in the terminal, less a 2% administration fee for the airport for our staff time and energy.
So a little over a year ago, we voted to give relief to our concession occupants. I guess bridge that to how this is working. Was that that was just our losses last year? We were probably compensated by CARES 1.
Yes, so what you approved last year went through 12/31. And because it was reducing our operating revenues, we could apply for reimbursement through CARES 1. This plan came along a little bit later. And this is the FAA's way, the federal government's way of trying to help out those concessionaires that don't have direct relationships with the FAA, but are still really impacted in the airport. So what the FAA strongly recommended was we take first quarter of 2020 revenues and then apply that proportionally to the first quarter of 2021 to give them relief. So you're taking a time period that was mostly not impacted by COVID and applying it to a time period where airports have generally stopped waiving those minimum annual guarantees and things like that to help them out. I will tell you that CARES 3, which I think they called ARPA, is going to be similar. We know there's funding out there. The FAA staff have a lot more grant programs to work with right now than they typically do. So we're waiting on guidance from them. But what we're hearing is there's concessions revenue set aside in that pot of funding, and it will likely follow the same format. So good chance that I'll be up here towards the end of the year asking for something very similar again.
Okay, so then when it says that this goes until the end of, the expires at CARES closeout, that's CARES closeout, CARES 2 closeout.
Yes.
So do I understand that regardless of what we voted on a year ago, they're telling us how to spend?
They are strongly encouraging us to use that 2020. I'm talking about a lot of years with you guys today. Previous to COVID versus COVID affected time period and kind of allocate it in this format. Yeah.
What we voted on last year was that linked to the airline to, are the airline technically a tenant of the airport as well?
The airlines are technically a tenant of the airport, and they did receive relief in there and us not collecting revenues for a time. But that's,
So that's independent of this.
Correct.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the traditional concessionaire
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah, this is food, retail, car rental in the terminal.
What we did last year covered the airlines though, in addition to.
Right.
It seems like a very small amount for the food.
It sure does.
Mhm.
We're not allowed.
And I should mention that with this, as we're doing contract amendments with these concessionaires, if you approve this, there is a FAA form that they all have to fill out disclosing their PPP loan information a little bit, not a whole lot, but they do need to make some disclosures to the FAA on that. And if there's something in there that if they took it, they're not eligible for this.
Main reason-
Amanda,
But
Yes?
this is Dave. Just a quick question. 3 food vendors and retail vendors? We now have 3 food vendors?
Yes.
3 food
We do
vendors.
if you count vending machines, yes.
Oh, okay, but it still have one vendor in the cafe, so to speak.
Yeah, we have one restaurant,
Yeah,
and then we have the vending machine and the ATM are all concessionaires.
Oh, okay. And what about retail?
Yeah.
that's the retail.
Yeah, that is the retail.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
The retail. The primary reason this is coming through this is that the FAA does not have a direct mechanism to provide relief to concessionaires. So the laws are already in place for the airport through the reauthorization act, FAA authorization act, to provide that funding through airports to people.
Were they eligible for like the restaurant relief program or any of the other programs that were out there? You know, the restaurants have their own separate program. Are they classified as a restaurant where they can have revenue as well?
I don't know enough about that to know if they were or not.
Okay.
How does this compare, Amanda, to what we would have conceded last year during a similar timeframe?
That's a good question. I think we tend to be a little more generous locally.
So with what we did last year, that was
based on what the airport put together
Mhm.
for CARES 1. This is CARES 2. Are we being restricted that this is all we can do, or is this like a minimum that can be done?
This is what the FAA is offering.
If we
To the-
accept this, money, we have to do it this way. We could say, no, we don't want the money.
But if we accept the money and do it this way, is there anything prohibiting us from, losing more down the road?
Doing something ourselves locally.
Right.
No.
No.
there's nothing to that.
I think at the end of the day, we want to make sure all of our vendors are still intact. And we want to get back to normal, having the restaurant, having the gift shop that's with the restaurant, the vending machine, we want all that intact. So
They certainly have a much bigger hill to climb than somebody out on the street. because
yeah,
They couldn't have, we'll deliver it to your car, all that would bring you behind the security. So, one way to get in business is somewhere through. At least as far as I know. Pass through people on the other side.
So by saying yes to this, we could still keep an eye on the health of our life.
Who knows if they were eligible for PPP,
Right.
so on and so forth, would be useful information.
Yeah, and we have waived minimum annual guarantees for these folks as well for this year. That can be earlier in the year.
Work for than what the example.
Motion,
I'll second.
support. Roll call vote.
Kurt Ardemock,
yeah,
Dave Buster,
Yes,
Gilbert Halbert,
Yeah.
Mickey Miller,
Yes.
Cecile Munt,
Yes.
Eric Rankin,
Yes.
Mark Weiss,
Yes,
James Woodruff.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Can I say that?
Before you start, Craig, we have one piece of unfinished business.
Okay.
And I will get up my notes since I'm about the same age as our president. Brief. You'll remember that in March, we all completed our performance review form for Craig's employment, which were then compiled by the executive committee. Resulting ratings, comments considered and compared to the expectations and goals. Plan at that time was to have used this evaluation as a recommendation to the board at our March meeting for establishing salary level or extension of Craig's employment agreement. Was at about this time that we were advised that county had frozen all compensation as a result of the pandemic. Accordingly, the process had to be put on hold. County has now opened the salary schedules and after consideration of the new schedules, it is the unanimous recommendation of the executive committee that the board move Craig from K-15D band to K-15F band, effective with August payroll.
Like down from D to F. So it's up, okay, good, congratulations.
Thank you. The first time I've accepted an F with a smile.
I will need a motion and support.
So,
I have a motion.
I'll support.
I have support and roll call vote.
Kurt Ardemock,
yeah,
Dave Buster,
yes,
Gilbert Halbert,
Yeah.
Mickey Miller,
Yes.
Cecile Munt,
yes,
Eric Rankin,
Yes.
Mark Weiss,
yes,
James Woodruff.
Motion carried. Assuming there's no new business,
None that I'm aware of.
then we'll move on.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for a vote of confidence, and nice to receive that. Board report, or airport director's report, excuse me, for our July meeting. Just wanted to cover a few things. I always like to have a slide about our strategic framework as a reminder. We've been working on, and basically everything we're doing is focused towards this. On top of just what I call the core services of what we do that we have to do on a daily basis. Just a couple things I wanted to mention about some of the activities. I've had the pleasure of meeting with our state legislative delegation in the last, I'll call it a month and a half, certainly since our board meeting. They're busy this time, well, certainly at that time of year, it's near the end of session. But I had productive meetings with not only our direct, Julie Rogers is our direct person, and Matt, I can never remember Matt's last name. I get it confused, but the senator is our direct for Senate. But I've met with all of them surrounding in the surrounding areas, because as I tell people, we don't serve just the people in this district. We serve a wide area. So I wanted to meet with as many as possible. It was mostly focused on an introduction, just so they could meet me, I could meet them, but also talked about a couple issues that I think would be helpful for the airport. Not necessarily a specific issue, but things like providing incentives for air service on a state level. I think that would be very helpful and useful, certainly for Kalamazoo, but also to other airports. So those are the kinds of things we talked about as part of that. The other thing that we did is we had a lunch and learn and went into a deeper dive on our strategic plan, as you can see here, and then I'm just going to go to the next slide. It was really an interesting meeting because we had the opportunity to brief everybody on staff, certainly who was here and available to work, and I thought it was really good to answer the questions, show what we're doing, and really just show some of the things that we're doing behind the scenes, because some of this stuff is not stuff that's going to be very visible. It's a lot of, I'll call, foundational work. I just go through some of these things, developing a plan to grow and diversify revenue. Amanda's working on that as part of our budget, putting that stuff in there so we can get an understanding of what are some of the opportunities ahead of us. I have to take this off. I'm talking way too much to try to keep up with my breathing. Develop a formal staff development plan for each position. Eric's leading that, and we've got great involvement from the rest of staff, certainly his staff. And developing an incentive program to attract airlines. It's something I'm going to share with you, some progress that I've today. And just down the list, there's a whole bunch of things. The green indicates that we're on track. In fact, the check mark with the Amanda that was yellow has actually got turned in today, the contract. So that would be a green had I done this at 10 o'clock versus 9 o'clock. So I just, it's very important that we keep working on these things. We meet quarterly with Peter, our consultant, and I just, Peter's back here with work, and he's been really helpful for us to keep us on track. And as I say, to keep me on track. It's easy for me to just kick the can down the curb, or kick the curb, whatever. It's hand down the curb a little bit and get focused on other things. But he keeps us on track. And again, we meet quarterly. I believe our next one is in August for that. One of the outcomes of that, and if you're down toward my office, I've got some of them. We're creating a scorecard for the airport, and I've got that outside my office, and as soon next time Eric's down there, he's going to have it so it can be down there in maintenance and other places around the airport. The important thing is to communicate what we're doing and how it relates to the strategic plan. So everyone will have an opportunity to not only participate, but be actively engaged in it. Are there any questions on strategic plan before I move on to air service? These are some of the statistics for June. I know I'll let you guys get ahead of me on some of that. A couple of things that I wanted to talk about as you guys absorb this air service. The statistics for June is in June we sent a Kalamazoo gift pack to airlines. Basically, and I'll call out Discover Kalamazoo for helping put that together and getting that out to the airlines. It's not only our airlines, it's prospective airlines, and sometimes it's multiple people at those airlines because, network planning department might be 5 people. And I want to make sure everyone on network planning knows who Kalamazoo is. The good news is I received immediate feedback from when they started receiving it, thank yous from people. One of the guys was wearing the Kalamazoo shirt, or at least he took it to the conference that we were at. So again, you want to get in their focus, if you will. So it's just we plan on doing that a couple times a year, just so they know who we are, and continue to do that. I mentioned the Routes Americas conference. I'll come back to that in a second. I want to just go through some of the numbers. I hope everyone can see these numbers. I can't see them very well on there. These are current as of June, our June numbers. Thanks to staff and Jessica for getting these updated before the board meeting. And really thanks to the airlines for getting them in early enough, because they never do get them in early enough. But you can see we're at 7,641 employments, which is still down about 54%, I believe. Where's my percent difference from 19? About 51%, down 51%. I'm sorry, 49% from 2019. That's the good news. I mean, it's not as bad. We were using that we're going to be down 60% for budget numbers. So I'm pleased with that. The tough part for us is, unless something changes with seats in the market, it's not going to go much higher. We're at 85% full, which is effectively full because you got 50-seat aircraft. 85% is only 3 seats per aircraft. Now, United is throwing a 70-seater in there today, or for the month of July, if you happen to see the Embraer 170 flying out there, which is a very nice airplane for our market. But we really need more seats, and that's what that I was pressing upon them at the conference, and every conversation and everything that's going to go out is, you're leaving money on the table here in Kalamazoo when we do that. So again, American is 90% full. I mean, that's every flight out of here is just averaging 2 empty seats, and they're doing 2 departures a day. So that's only going to get worse as business travel returns. I mean, we haven't even hardly had any business travel return. Yes, Cecile.
So American, though, is outperforming where they were in 2019. They've added flights.
Yes, because they were doing 1 a day in June of 19. But June of 19 is not necessarily fair to compare to, because remember the runway was closed for 2 weeks. So we didn't have any flights during that time frame. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily compare that. That they were probably 2 or 3 a day under normal circumstances. So.
I think in the summer they were running 3 a day.
Yeah.
Typically.
Yeah.
I think that closure was like 16 days in a month, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Any
Okay.
idea how they're gonna sort that out, because they're also facing chance of flooding, because they don't have enough airplanes, they don't have pilots.
It's just going to take time for the
How are they gonna
system.
pick which market?
Well, they'll go where they're profitable. And that was the good news when I sat with American, is they were very pleased with the results. And my internal answer was, how can you not be? I mean, you're 90% full, which means you're going to be able to charge a pretty good fare for that. So I didn't say that, of course, but I think that would be a fair assessment. So it's going to take time for the industry to ramp up. It was easy to shut the light off, but just like any other system, you can't it's easy to shut down, but you have to ramp back up. I mean, I think Eric can attest, is a good personal example for the board. He had to come back, he got the call, but he had to go back to training. And then there's aircraft that need to be pulled back into the system. And so, yes. Exactly. So it's an ongoing issue. I think that as people see results, and American is a good example, sees results, I think we can anticipate some some return, if you will.
Did they reference in your discussions that they need to hear from the corporations and their commitment to return to business travel?
No, they did. I think they're very comfortable. But I will say that I'm working on making sure our corporations are sending letters to them, really specific to our desire for expansion to other hubs, but certainly inserting, that the commitment to what they're doing now. So, the tough part is, you get a network planner and he's in there for, he or she 4 or 5 months, and then they move to a new one. Our person that we chatted with at O'Hare, we said, we'll get you all this information. She said, don't bother, I'm moving to a different department. So, you get them while you can in there.
Right. So America is our potential partner with SCASB.
Yes.
As well.
Mhm.
So I assume I good with 90% load factor in that discussion.
That is, and just, American offered support, but they're not our only, as we're looking to go things. Yeah. So, but American has offered support. This is all bodes well for those kinds of discussions. If they're showing that it's 90% full, and as we've communicated with them over and over, is, this is 90% full with about 25% of the business traffic that we normally have. So I
limited options too, right? I mean, the Delta's the only one really doing kind of a full day of
right.
flights.
Right.
American United are only doing morning flights.
That's right.
So if you're looking for an option, it's limited, yes. Flights are so full.
That's right. Yeah, it is.
I think it's critical that, going back to the shortage. You're
Right.
on their radar. So
Right.
what's going to happen is sooner or later, somebody's going to set it down, saying, well, we had these 4 markets.
That's right.
So we really ought to go under ordinary circumstances, we would.
Mhm.
So we only got 3 airplanes.
That's right.
Or whatever the case.
Yep. Yeah, no,
We
that's
want to make sure that they know, not only are we at 90% now, we've got 75% business.
Right.
Coming.
That's right.
And so on. Maybe everybody doesn't have that.
Right. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm hitting in that monthly. I've got these numbers now, and, I'm waiting for about a week to put out some stuff based on waiting for some more local news to come in. But I share that locally, or share that with the network planners and others, every month. You're right. They do need to hear it. And then also be specific with our asks for, because I have one ask for American and United, another for Delta, and then there's another, ask for some of the other hopeful carriers that are not quite here yet.
And this has got to be great for that pitch as well to the other carriers to say, hey, we like our airlines that are here now, but they can't accommodate all the demand. So
That's right.
help
That
another airline in here.
That's right. Because we're a market that gets overshadowed by geography.
Right.
And when they see that there is a desire and, our loads are good in there, and then, they can also get in there. Not only are loads good, because, a load that they're selling at $50 a ticket isn't really good, but when they're averaging, we're averaging, I forget what the numbers were, but a pretty good yield on there for the average fare. So it's all good news. I did have the opportunity to meet with a couple other airlines. There's, we're out there, and then there's I call some tire kicker airlines, some people who have certificates that are looking to where to put airplanes. So met with some of those, and met with representatives of the other low-cost carriers that would certainly be good fits here in the marketplace. So I just have to put the last one, because going in person is much better than meeting, on Zoom and stuff like that. Not only do you get to meet with the airlines, but you get to see other familiar faces there. So I had a great opportunity to catch up with Dave. He's having a great time out in Colorado, and And I told him, and I'll say this, I'll say it to him 50 more times if I see him, is, I want to thank you for leaving me a good airport and a good staff who is motivated to do things, and also a good board. So,
I
so,
saw him in March.
okay,
With Stephen Dale.
okay.
And,
He's having a good time. He's there. He was at the same conference, selling his soul for more seats. So, like I was. So,
Sorry,
sir.
One more question. So
Mhm.
the Minneapolis flight.
Sure.
Delta has come back kind of sporadically, right? It's been.
So they keep kicking that one further out along. Delta's problem, heard it straight from Delta directly. Their problem is aircraft. They don't have the aircraft to put it in the market, so they're selectively putting those back. And interestingly, when they told us, they said, "Yeah, we're doing the same thing in Dayton and Lexington. We just don't have the aircraft to put back yet." So be patient. It's funny because that was, when we were talking to the lady, she said, this was the end of June. She goes, "Well, it's in there for August. So, and we're only 35 days out. So my confidence level is pretty," and then she trailed off and said, "I'm not so sure." And that's what we're getting. And that's what the industry is getting from these folks. And of course, me being a smaller market, we're always, and one that's within a certain, distance from the hub as well. We're closer in. So. Okay, any questions or anything about air service? I just wanted to take note of, I've crafted a incentive plan that we can use to attract airlines, and I want to introduce it to you guys, so you guys at least know what I'm working on, and then that way I can communicate these to some of the airlines that we're talking to. But basically, what I've come up with is a kind of a 4-tiered option, or 4 different options. One is for new entrants, basically a new airline. Sun Country Airlines or Breeze, or pick an airline decides they want to fly out of here. And then we would waive fees for them associated with landing fees and terminal rents and stuff, which is kind of standard stuff that is done. But I'm also throwing in other things to make it attractive to them for startup costs, i.e. Marketing support, assistance with ground handling, to help offset those direct costs in there for there. Option B is for new markets, and that's for our existing carriers. So let's just say we have an American Airlines that decides they want to go to another hub, or United wants to go to Delta. I don't really care, but it's some of the same stuff to help offset that. And then the other one, which I call the hardest thing to do is you want to help reward airlines for increasing seats in the marketplace. So I've got a 3rd tier in here that basically provides a seat credit. So if an airline had 10,000 seats in the marketplace for this year, in a market that's been around for a couple of years, and then next year they added flights and it became 20,000 seats, it would be credits that could be applied to their bill, as opposed to cash. As Amanda told me, let's not do anything that pays them money, but we can apply credits for that. And that's just something to help incentivize them to, when they're looking at, just like Gil said, if they've got 3 airplanes in 4 markets, let's make them take a second look at us in that regard. And then the 3rd one applies to cargo, and that's really just helping to attract, waiving some landing fees to help attract cargo in there, make it easy for them. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you guys, and if there's any questions on anything within the incentives.
Is there any way to backfeed the cost of these things to some of the CARES funding?
That's a fair question. I'd have to get into and look at, because there's some things that you can do.
Back to the idea.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't like the idea of writing a check,
Yeah, we certainly,
but maybe if we could write them a check out of the CARES fund,
yeah.
that might change.
So Yeah, what it is, so CARES allows you to spend money on anything that the airport is legally allowed to spend money. But there's a separate, it's not CARES related, there's separate, I'll call regulations, that are what airports are allowed to spend on incentives. And so that's the fine line there. And I would be very careful as I enter that. Ideally, I'm not spending any money on incentives with CARES funds. And given what we already have programmed and what we anticipate through the budget, we probably wouldn't do it anyway. And certainly given the time frame, because nobody's calling me tomorrow on this stuff. So.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Craig,
I mean, it's a great, incentive program is great. Is there any demand or merit behind having general aviation in that too, more corporate, where you could have an airplane base here, some sort of incentive to promote that idea?
That would probably,
Cargo in it.
sure, I mean, the short answer is nothing in here. General aviation, we don't charge any money anyway. So outside of a lease or anything like that, those would be something that I would say would be part of a lease negotiation or something, as if a company were looking to come here. I heard somebody on,
yeah, Craig, the incentive to ground handling, what does that entail?
so without going into too great a detail, basically what we would do is what I've got in here is a ground handling credit per the number of seats. Thank you. Per seat for aircraft.
The credit is, are you having somebody else provide the ground support?
Somebody else would, yes, somebody else would do the ground support. I'm not looking to get in the business of ground support. It would be somebody, the airlines, as you know, they typically work with, or, they'll put an RFP out or
Right.
something, or work with somebody that we're already working with.
Right, okay, thank you.
Sure.
Greg, Dave,
Once this,
how many ground
Go ahead,
handlers do
Cecile's
we have
talking.
right
Hold on,
now?
Dave.
Yeah, I can't hear your video.
Well, okay, I apologize. So I would say right now in place, we've got Unify, which handles Delta, and we have United, what do they call themselves? United Ground Express, which handles United, which is a subsidiary of United Airlines. And then Envoy does American, which is a subsidiary. But I'll give you an example. Up in Grand Rapids, AvFlight does all the ground handling for Allegiant and Frontier. In Fort Wayne, Trago Dugan does all the Allegiant flights. So there's a number of these companies that are out there that provide those. Again, we wouldn't be in the business of selecting those. That's between the airline and that's part of their process when they're looking to enter new markets. Any other questions?
Well, on that,
Sure.
Looking at the 10,000 foot level,
Mhm.
it seems it's much more efficient if there's one that handles all the ground services for all. Otherwise, you got people shutting on their phone.
It could be.
Because their airplane is not coming in for 2 hours, and here's such one that needs to be served.
It could be, and some airports are in that business. I believe Quad Cities is, I know Springfield Branson is, and actually Columbus Rickenbacker does that for cargo and I believe airlines with Allegiant, but don't quote me on that one.
we used to have that, we used to have like American United share.
Mhm. Yes,
American Delta.
that's right.
And then Delta.
Mhm. Yeah, I do know in Fort Wayne, Delta handled the United flights as well. So,
So the only comment I had is when you have these incentives, some of them specific to existing providers, I know, and even new providers, I know companies like Kellogg are regularly called upon by the sales reps And if we can get the noise going that direction in addition to the routing
Mhm.
services, then those customer forums gives the opportunity for them to
Right,
tell American Delta and whoever else,
right.
Southwest Airlines.
And you might be able to help me with American, because I don't know American sales rep, but I know United's and Deltas for our place. Yes. Okay. Any other questions? That is all I have.
And next. Remember time, and we'll just go ahead and do this alphabetically, so we don't end up with any level of confusion, so I'll start with first.
Nice to be back here in person. Actually with some of the board and staff, it's great. I appreciate the hard work on the incentive plan. I think that's great. Making the connections to the community.
Dave,
Yeah, I want to apologize for the overtalk, but we can't hear many of the board members when they're talking, so. When, like Kurt, I didn't hear anything he just said, but anyways, I have nothing else.
okay. Greg? He's not on, okay. I just had him on the list, all right. Nikki?
No real comments, just leisure travel is way back. And I'm working with Dave to get a list of travel advisors in the community, to network with them because most of the travel advisors now don't have brick and mortar locations. So it's not something you can pull up, a yellow book and find someone's information. So there's some other resources that I'm tapping into to get a list of travel advisors in the area.
Seal?
I guess the only question I had was the timeline for those of us who are up for reappointment.
It's, it firms end in July, but I don't know exactly what the process is for.
Contact, I submitted all my stuff.
Yeah, I haven't been contacted.
Yeah.
So usually I would just receive the like the appointment.
Right. Yeah.
At least in past history, this, because you remember it, they generally, they haven't made new appointments, they'll extend the current one, so we still have representation, so even if they're backlogged and having trouble getting things done, it'll get put off as necessary.
I'll be reaching out to, I'm just on that.
There's three of us that day. Yeah.
Eric?
Yep, no comment.
Okay, thank you, Captain. You look real good in your uniform.
Thank you.
Art?
No comment.
Jim?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I'll add my comment, and that is that over the course of all this pandemic thing, one of the things I found out was there are certain people in the world that just kept their distance. But I'm happy to report that this group is not in that. It's great to be back. I feel like we're more productive, frankly, and I think it's a good thing. So I want to keep it pushing forward in hopes that we won't have to back. A better organization. And with that, we are adjourned.